So from here, what you want to do is grab either your 4-stitch markers or your yarn, your 5-inch yarn pieces. And we're going to section off a total of 14 stitches. Now, within those 14 stitches, we are going to section them into 3 portions. So as you can see here, I have 8 stitches in the middle. So within those 14, we're going to find the 8 middle stitches. I have them marked here with the white yarn. You can use your stitch markers, whatever is more convenient for you. And then from those middle 8 stitches, we're going to count 3 stitches to the left and 3 stitches to the right. So from here, you're going to attach your yarn into that 2nd stitch marker, which will be our first stitch of our middle 8th stitches, if that makes sense. So we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to add our single crochet into that same stitch that we just chained 1 in. And then we're going to we're going to single crochet in the next 7 stitches until we get to our 3rd stitch marker, which will be the 8th stitch of our middle stitch. So we're going to chain 1, single crochet in the same stitch, and then 7 single crochets. So this is our 7th, our 8th stitch. So we're going to single crochet into that stitch. Once I get myself situated here. Okay. And then we're going to slip stitch into that next stitch. Now we're going to turn our work. We're going to skip that slip stitch that we made, and we're going to work into that next stitch 2 single crochets. And then we're going to work 2 single crochets in each following 7 stitches. So we should end up with 16 total single crochets. I'm going to finish up here, and I'll meet you guys back at the end. Alright, now that we have our 16 single crochets for row 2, here sometimes it could be a little tricky. We don't want to work into our previous row, so just make sure you have 16 single crochets for your 2nd row. And then from there, we're going to slip stitch into that next stitch. We're going to turn our work, and we're going to increase the single crochet into every other row. Now again, you do not want to work into the first slip stitch. We're going to skip that one, and we're going to work in our first stitch. As long as you come out with 24 stitches in this row, you'll be fine. I know it can get a little bit tricky, but watch the video, rewind it again if you need a replay. Now that we have our 24 stitches, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to slip stitch into that next free stitch, which should be our 2nd stitch to the left or right of our 8. All right, so in our third row, we are just going to crochet into each of the next 24 stitches. No increases, no decreases, just 24 stitches. I know in the description they say 24 to 26 stitches, and that's true. Sometimes you may have more or less, but like I always say, a stitch or two is not going to hurt a project. So you're doing great. Just keep going, and I'll meet you guys at the end. Hey y'all, welcome to the last row. So just like the previous rows, the previous row, we're just going to single crochet into each stitch, and we're going to slip stitch into that last opening stitch, which should be where our stitch marker is. We're going to remove our stitch marker and work the same way we have been the last few rows. We're going to skip that slip stitch, and we're just going to work one single crochet in each stitch until we get to the end. All right, now that we're at our last stitch marker, we are going to slip stitch. Oh, well, my bad, y'all. I forgot the last stitch. All right, so after we finish our last stitch of the row, we're going to slip stitch into our last stitch marker position. We're going to cut about 15 to 20 inches before we pull our yarn through. So right now I just got the loop. I'm going to cut it, and then we're going to use that to help us sew the brim onto the actual base of the hat. So here's how I'm going to fasten it off. I'm pretty much going to slip knot the end. I'm going to give it a nice tug. There it is. And now we're going to use our darn needle. Oh, but before we grab our darn needle, I want to make sure you all use the right type of mannequin. Now, there are two types of mannequins. You have one that's slightly slanted. We don't want to use that for beginning projects because it can cause our projects to be a little lopsided, maybe not as centered. You want a centered mannequin head, one that's facing straight. As you can see here from the back, one's a little more slanted, which is the black one, and the white one is a little bit, well, the white one is facing forward. So we want to use that just to help us make everything a bit more symmetrical. All right, let's get into the fit. Now, you can leave the hat like this. This is our new Newsboy, regular Newsboy caps. You can play with the brim, make it a little longer or shorter. But you can get a 2-for-1 with this video. You can leave it like that. These are very popular. But for this video, we're going to give you the Newsboy 2.0. So we're going to need at least 3 stitch markers. And as you see me doing here, I'm just fishing our yarn through our darn needle. So from here, we're going to count. I'm going to count our magic circle as 1 row, 2 rows, 3, 4, and 5. So between our 5th and 6th row of stitches is where we're going to work. Now, you're going to have to reference the video to see exactly where in between the 5th and the 6th stitch you're going to have to work, because it can get a little tricky. Now, you don't necessarily have to work it the way that I did, but the way that I sew, or I'm going to show you how to sew it, is the way you need to sew it. So basically here you see our 6th row of stitches here, and then our 5th is marked with the stitch marker. We're going to be working in between our stitches. So you got 1 stitch and you got 2 stitches. Yeah, just watch the video, guys. I don't know what better way to explain it, but we're going to be working in between the bottom of our 5th row and the top of our 6th row. So I'm using 3 stitch markers to help me anchor the 2 sides and the middle, so we can sew our brim onto the base of our hat. Because honestly, once you start sewing, it can get a little bit tricky. But I'll show you guys what to do with the sides in a second. Alright, now I'm laying the hat flat just to get an idea of how things are going to lay. Now, even though I lined up the 2 side stitch markers with the same row as the one in the middle, we're going to change that up a little bit. And you'll see what I mean in a moment. Laying things flat will just give you a better idea of how things are going to lay. So this middle portion right here that I started with, I'm just going to place my stitch marker into roughly the middle-ish part of the brim. That way I know where to stop. If you're sewing on the left, you'll stop from the left. If you're sewing from the right, you'll stop from the right. Okay, as you can see there, that's why I put it 2, 3, 4, 5. So in between the 5 and the 6th stitch. All right, so this is what I was talking about on the end. So you want to have that curvature-ish look like that. So you might have to bring your stitch marker from its original position into a more curved position, if that makes sense. The brim will give you that curvature, but the sides you have to kind of pinch and play with. Use your mannequin head if you need to. I think I was working in between the 7th and the 8th stitch. So you're gonna see me adjust it. So this is the 5th row. There. That's the 6th row. And this is our 7th row. So we wanna, and then our 8th and our 9th single crochets. So from the 5th row, I think I'm going to adjust it into the 7th row, I believe. Let's watch it together, y'all. Yep, so from here I'm just going to add our stitch marker. We don't necessarily want to work on the stitches. We always want to work in between the stitches, like I'm showing you here. So just place the stitch marker in between there and line it up with our first stitch, like you see here. And then it's going to give us that shape like that. Then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Alright, so from here, you're just gonna kind of work your hat, see if everything matches up. You see mine, it's a little bit off-centered. So I'm just gonna remove my stitch marker, lay it flat again, so I can get a real idea of what the middle is. So I'm gonna try to find a stitch in between the 5th and the 6th row that lines up with the middle. Attach our stitch marker there. Now the stitches at the top of the hat will not match the stitches on the brim, which is why we have our stitch markers. So we're gonna have to kind of work our yarn to match those points. I am counting the stitches just so I can get an estimate. I think I had about 11, I believe, on the top on each side. So about like 22 stitches maybe, but we have about 24 to 26 stitches at the bottom. So with that, you're just going to have to work it out, guys. You'll see what I do in the video. But after we place our stitch markers, we're going to place it back onto the mannequin just so we can make sure that everything is pretty much where we want it to line up. You don't want the side seams to be too far back to where it's past your ear or too far forward to where you don't get a proper brim. But this is what it should look like at this point. Sorry about the squeak, guys. My dog just came in. But yeah, so you can make some adjustments if you want. I was thinking maybe I should lower that a little bit. It's no finite way to do this portion. It's just eyeballing, just having confidence in yourself. But even though we're working in between the stitches like that, you're going to fish your tail, the tail end of your yarn through your stitch, through the base of the hat, and back through the actual single crochet stitch you just worked. So if you can watch the video, it'll be better explained. So here we're going to fish our yarn through the single crochet, through the middle of the stitches, like you see here. Apologies for the shaky camera. And then you're not going to go into the next stitch. You're going to go right back through that same stitch to secure it. Apologies, I just kept counting my stitches just so I wouldn't lose my place. Because I did remove my stitch marker. But yeah, like I said, you may have to play with some angles. Just make the hat fit your criteria, what you want. There's no right way or wrong way to do this part. Except you do want to make sure that you line up your brim with the base of the hat so things aren't looking too wonky like I did. Sometimes you do want to go in and count the stitches just so you can have the approximate amount. Like I said, it won't be exact, but you can play around with it a little bit. 1 or 2 stitches isn't going to hurt, but make sure that when you go through your stitch like this one, that you fish it right back through. So we're going to go through our stitch. We're going to catch. All right, see here. You're going to have to adjust it as you go as well. Yarn can be a little tricky because it moves. So you want to move and groove with it. But yes, this part is just the most important part. We're working through, we're in between the stitches, but we're working to make sure that we have a nice stitch like brim, so we don't have to go in and work single crochets or slip stitches to create this look. And here again, I'm just counting to approximate how many stitches I need to put and where I need to place them. Just make sure as you work along too that you give your yarn a little bit of a tug just to keep things nice and neat. But yeah, just work around. I'm gonna let the video play for you guys. Just take what you can from it, and I'll meet you guys at the end. All right, real quick. As long as your ankle points match, you should be good. So continue to approximate, and I'll meet y'all at the end. All right, now that we're at the end, we are going to fasten off our yarn. Right. Even though I'm gonna not put a knot here in order to prevent it from pulling through our work like that, we are going to find some stitches, take one strand of our yarn and fish it through those stitches. You can use a crochet needle or a darn needle. Just fish it through just a little portion. Doesn't have to be too big. And we're going to tie it off again, just like that. That way it doesn't pull through our work and it stays where it's supposed to. Now we're just going to fish that inside of our brim. And oh my gosh, y'all. Can y'all believe it? We done. After you do that, just cut it on out. Or you can pull it through like I did. But that's it. That's y'all Newsboy hat, cap, whatever you want to call it. We are done, y'all. I apologize for the delay. But delay no longer.